everybody? Welcome back to Between the Lines podcast with Chris and Aiden. NFL kind of on the quiet side right now. There's a lot of uproar with other trades and obviously NFL honors coming up. But Chris and I are actually going to talk about the NBA for the first half of this episode. We haven't talked about NBA yet. To be fair, let's cover that. Chris and I were just going to talk about whatever main sport is hot in media right now or any big news, whatever. That's the whole point of this podcast. But a lot of trade talks, actions, actual trades that happened in the past week or so, I guess you could say. The most surprising happened, was it 2 nights ago, Chris? 2 nights ago?
Yeah, I think it was Saturday night.
Saturday night, Chris and I and our other friend Matt playing video games. It was midnight. We all get the alert on our phone from Shams. Luka Doncic has been traded to the Los Angeles Lakers for Anthony Davis and a bag of chips, in my opinion. I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat anything, but Chris, how long did we, Chris? We all three of us straight up put our controllers down and we're on our phones, literally like, okay, what the heck is happening? Is Shams getting hacked? This does not make any sense for me right now. It took a while for me to process it and actually dive into it. But Chris, I'm gonna let you go first because I got a good amount to say as well. But I just want to hear what you've said, and because a lot of us were speechless when this first happened. I don't think as a single person expected it.
Yeah, well, honestly, we only did one episode last week because we thought this would be a little bit of a slower week because, it's the week before the Super Bowl. There's no football. There's not much going on other than regular season sports. Obviously, the NBA trade deadline coming up, but I don't think anyone expected anything too major, really, like other than maybe Jimmy Butler getting moved and some other moves, but I don't think anyone saw this coming. Yeah, I mean, like you said, we were just playing Xbox. I look down at my phone. I see an alert. Luka's been traded to the Lakers. I was like, no, 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 no way. So we all just like put down our controllers, went online, see what we could find. We thought it was fake. We thought he got hacked, and then it got confirmed by ESPN. And I mean, I think we spent like 45 minutes almost in silence, just trying to understand the
Confused.
magnitude of what happened. Like that's like the biggest trade we might see in our entire lifetimes. That's not hyperbole. Trades like that don't happen in sports.
Well,
Like
after I was, yeah, go ahead, go
you
ahead, go
talk
ahead. Sorry.
about like untouchable players, and he is one that I would say 29 other teams would probably have deemed untouchable, but the Mavericks clearly didn't feel that way. Um, from a basketball perspective, I actually think that Anthony Davis is getting like a little disrespected because Anthony Davis is still an All NBA forward. Like he is a
Yep.
really good four. Maybe if he has to play the five, being in Dallas allows him to play the four because they have a really, really solid fives in Gafford and Lively, so that they have size where he doesn't have to play the five, which is one of his concerns with the Lakers. But I don't really understand the process of they offered Luca first and didn't, try to leverage the package they were getting from the
Yeah.
Lakers other teams. I don't understand. Anthony Davis
Well,
isn't like that good for essentially a one for one swap. Like if you swap them for like, Gilgis Alexander, like I get it. They're on the same level of player, but I just don't understand the need. Like I would have if you're gonna move Luca, get 8 first round picks and just tank.
yeah.
That's just my thinking.
Well, so here's what's weird to me, right? Is we hear let's go through the reports that we've heard of. The Mavericks are concerned with Luka's conditioning. He's 270 pounds. We see video evidence of him with the Lakers. He don't look anything close to that. And number one, if that's the case, he's still one of the more dangerous and valuable players in the league. Probably top five in terms of age and talent, right? Like Chris just mentioned, an untouchable player. So the Mavericks just went to the finals last year. Okay. They had Luka, who, in my opinion, kind of carried them through that playoff run to the
He did.
finals. Um,
Yep, he did.
and 25, one of the most valuable players in the entire league. And Dallas decides is that he their GM, I believe, came out and said defense wins championships. Now, obviously, Luka, he's not exactly the most defensive heavy guy, and he's probably not the most talented guy for when it comes to defense. Anthony Davis is a threat, fair enough. But the thought process of moving the face of the franchise for essentially a run at the championship for the next 2 years is wild to me. Is absolutely wild. You have 3 more years of Anthony Davis's contract. He's 30, what, 31 years old or something like that. Kyrie's older too. You have a lot of older stars on this team. Luka was your guy. And what the Lakers just got? The Lakers got the guy that LeBron could pass the baton to. Okay, that's as simple as it goes. Lakers now have a guy where I understand people in the past have wanted to play for LeBron and the Lakers, obviously. But obviously, with LeBron's age, he gets older and older, but he's still good. Chris and I talked about this or we were hanging out together. We were talking about LeBron. But when LeBron eventually passes down the torch to Luka, there's a franchise opportunity there. Stars are gonna want to play for the Lakers now. So if I'm the Mavericks, you better win it the next 2 years to prove us wrong. You better win it. Will it happen? I don't know. Like Chris just said, Anthony Davis was really struggling with the Lakers. He was forced to play the five a lot. That's not where his position is. He is a power forward at heart. That's why he was so good on the Pelicans for so many years. We saw him be dominant when he played at the forward with the Lakers at sometimes. So if the Mavs can put him at power forward, he could be very good. But he's not Luka good, and he's not as valuable as Luka to me. So the thought process of going 1-for-1 and basically giving up the smaller assets being equivalent is absolutely insane to me. This GM better know what he's doing, because if the Mavericks don't win it in the next 2 or 3 years, this will go down as one of the worst trades in terms of Mavericks getting rid of him in sports history. Not basketball, sports history. Like Chris just said, this is one of the biggest trades I've ever seen in my life. That goes with football, soccer, hockey, baseball, basketball, whatever sport, friggin' badminton, if you want to say. I don't care. This is one of the biggest things I've ever seen in my life. The fact that you take a guy and say, hey, you're going to be this guy for the rest of their lives. You're going to be the Dallas Maverick. You are the Dallas Maverick. You got passed on by Dirk, right? It was Dirk Nowitzki right to Luka. It was great. And you said, you know what? No, you struggle a little bit with weight or whatever, which is baloney. I don't know where that is coming from. Sorry, I'm going on a rant a bit, but it's just absolutely unbelievable to me. I couldn't process it when I first saw it. The Lakers have a future now, something that they've been struggling to look for past LeBron. They have someone now.
Um, there's a lot to unpack. Honestly, I don't know if the Mavericks justifying the move by saying he's out of shape and doesn't play defense is it's not really the right way to go about it. I think their GM thought he was making a good like sneaky move that could help the Mavericks win this year when they're already like the 7 or 8 seed. They're not even like a top seed in the
Yeah.
West. But I don't know. The conditioning is definitely a concern because he he got them to the finals last year, but I know he averaged like 28 points a game in the finals, but his defense was atrocious and
Oh
he
yeah, it
did
always
look
is.
out of shape at points. So I understand if they had real concerns about moving forward with Luca. That part I get. I just don't get the return or
Yeah,
they're
I
not
agree with
he's
you,
not
Chris.
actively like there's teams that you could have gotten so much more from if you shopped them. You could have sent him to I don't even know who has picks anymore. Oklahoma City always has picks. San
Oklahoma.
Antonio
Dude,
has
could you
picks.
imagine?
Like
Could you
you
imagine
could have sent him.
Shea and Luca? Holy crap.
I don't even know how that would work. They'd probably have to flip. That's why it's probably not a good fit.
Yeah.
But I'm just throwing teams out there with picks. Like I just they could have gotten more players too. I mean, they got
Yeah.
Max Christie and Anthony Davis and a 2029 first. It's just it's the return that's more concerning. If they got like, 10 first round picks and pick swaps and a couple young players, I'd be
Yeah.
like, all right, like, you know what? They want to rebuild. Luca's not playing this year. He hasn't played in a while. And they don't want to pay him the super max next summer. They just got a new ownership in there who they don't want to commit the money. You know what? I could see it because like it kind of reminds me of when Juan Soto got traded from the Nationals in the sense that they didn't want to, they offered him the contract, didn't want to pay him anything more, and they
Good
just moved him
comparison,
while they
yeah.
could. They didn't maximize the return on Luca. This is like trading Luca if he was out for like a year and a half with like a torn ligament or something.
Right.
He's playing like next week. He's gonna be back.
Yeah.
So I just think, and we're in the middle of a season. Like bidding wars in the middle of a season at the deadline tend to be, a lot more favorable to the seller because teams are trying to win a championship. So you're willing to push the chips in, so to speak. Like if they got a couple teams from the West and the East into a bidding war, like I said, Oklahoma City or some of these other teams, they could have driven up the price on the Lakers. Like I read originally that I think Dalton Connect and maybe Austin Reeves were in the deal or one of the two, but the Lakers GM talked them out. You got played, like you got played by
Yeah,
Rob Pelinka, and you didn't have to. So it's just I feel bad for the Mavericks fans, honestly.
yeah.
Um,
But like you just said, Rob Palenka, great move.
yeah, he
Great
played them.
move.
He
He
played them.
played them so well. Like you just said, Chris, Austin Reeves and Connect being somebody that they wanted to target, and they were able to keep both of them and get the stud. That's a bright future. That's a really bright future to me. So, I'm respect to the Lakers, dude. Respect to the Lakers. They
Yeah, I
they
mean,
they
the
killed it.
Lakers, like you said, they have their next. I also read today it's not a guarantee that Luka resigns there for a
Yeah,
supermax, but I assume he will. But
yeah.
if he's given the chance, I mean, maybe Luka goes and tests free agency and sees what's out there. I know the NBA is a little weird that you can't really get into bidding wars because of like the cap and all that, but you know, this isn't. He's got to see how he likes it in Los Angeles because he just bought a $15 million home in Dallas and they shipped him off. Yeah, I can promise you he's not going to do that again until he's like absolutely sure that this
Matured,
is
yeah.
maybe it's probably the place that he's going to retire or spend 10 years.
Yeah. Um I don't know what's gonna happen. A lot of players have come out and been like talking about like how nobody's safe and all that stuff, which is true now. Obviously, I mean the fact that this trade kind of accumulated over a couple hours in such short notice was absolutely absurd. That's what I think is scary about it. But yeah, we'll talk about these other players. One guy that's been in basically every news headline of the NBA for the past like 2.5 weeks is Jimmy Butler. Um, Jimmy Butler requested a trade. Pat Riley, not interested in trading him at all. Um, Kept getting suspended constantly, kind of pulling this Antonio Brown vibe. For anybody that doesn't know, Antonio Brown became an absolute lunatic on the NFL field and very irresponsible at times. Constantly like leaving games early or leaving practices early, getting fines, suspensions, you name it, whatever, just being immature. And Jimmy essentially is kind of like that. He's kind of like that kid at an amusement park where you take the candy away and he's frustrated. He sits in a corner and he won't move until you give him the candy back. That's what it feels like right now. And it's me being a Miami Heat fan. I mean, I'm not exactly committed to basketball as much as some other people, but I've rooted for the Heat for a while. My cousin became a Heat fan and got me into basketball, and that's how we got involved. But seeing this as a Heat fan is just disappointing, considering how much Jimmy did for us in such a short time, especially in his 30s. Um, 'Cause, yeah, maybe if he did want to get traded, I wouldn't have minded it either, just to get some value back. But now with Jimmy's actions, he's become completely unvaluable. The Warriors were in on him and completely backed out now. There's a lot of trade talk with somebody else that we'll talk about in a little bit. The Phoenix Suns are involved in him, are very interested in getting him, but a guy like Bradley Beal would be ideal, but he's got a no trade clause on his contract, so the Heat can't get any kind of player back like that. So you got to hope for maybe a couple seconds at best. But yeah, Chris, what do you think about this whole Jimmy Butler situation?
I don't understand like why he's being like this. He's making it so difficult for everyone involved. It makes no sense to me. He doesn't want to play for the Heat, but he doesn't want to go to these other teams. So just retire. Like I don't understand
Yeah,
what we're even talking about here. If you don't want to play for the Heat and they're willing to trade you and they've had multiple packages come across the table to them that they've been willing to accept and you don't want to go there, then just retire because
yeah,
it's not fair to the Heat. It's not fair to the other teams. Um, his legacy is definitely tainted, honestly, in my opinion. I know he
yeah.
took the
I
Heat
agree.
to the finals, but like when you act like this, it's just like how can you root for like it's not a good role model for NBA fans or I don't know. It's just I don't know what's going on.
I,
I hope
I
he's all right. Like I hope there's nothing behind the scenes going on. It's just I don't think that this is being handled professionally at all. And if they
right.
are able to move him, it would be a blessing if they I would take anything
Yeah,
to get rid of him right now.
I mean, I'm not saying we were gonna get anything crazy like anything like we just talked about with Luka getting the right value for him. Definitely when the trade talks first opened up, we were gonna get something decent for him, but one action after another, it kept leading to just like becoming more and more unvaluable. And, you're right, Chris. Like seeing him the past 5 years and taking us to two finals, it was absolutely amazing. I mean, we didn't win any of them, but like it was exciting to see because he was a dog. He was an absolute dog, and it was so much fun. Like my brother was so invested in it. Finally, got Jimmy Butler gear and all that stuff. It was like he's the guy for my brother to grow up kind of with, for the past 5 years. But yeah, I just it's a sour ending. It's a really sour ending. I don't know how you. I can get his frustration for not finishing those finals or whatever if that's what this whole thing is about, like not winning anymore. But to act like this is so immature, especially as a veteran in the league. Because we had this whole conversation when Antonio Brown went off and did all these things. Being a grown man in his 30s and acting like this is very immature. And yeah, like Chris said, we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. Maybe there's struggles with friends or family, or I don't know, something with the front office that's going on. Whatever, that's not in our control. But from what we know, Jimmy's just kind of going on a rampage, and from what we know, like I just said, it's sad to see. It's really sad because I loved Jimmy Butler. I was so hyped when we first got him. He's kind of that not journeyman, I guess, but he had a long he's kind of struggled to find a home, I guess you could say. And he really did. I thought he did find one with Miami. I think he did until this stuff
We
happened.
saw Yeah, I mean, we saw similar issues in Minnesota where he was having disagreements with management and the coaching staff and the players. So yeah, there is
Yep.
clearly something to Jimmy not being able to stick in one place very long. I know he was only in Philly for like a year and they didn't re-sign him. They chose Tobias Harris. Like I don't know if maybe they thought that Harris was a better fit personally compared to on the court, because on the court, I mean, Jimmy's way better than Tobias Harris. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's just Jimmy hasn't been able to stick around, and maybe we're starting to find out why. But
Yeah. So
I think this
yeah.
also
Go ahead. Go
brings up
ahead.
another scenario because it seems like the only place that's going to take him right now is the Suns. Seems like that's it.
Yeah.
I read there was a deal on the table that the Heat would have taken where they would have gotten Wiggins and I think a couple picks from the Warriors,
Yep.
and Jimmy did not want to go there. So I read though that if Phoenix isn't able to get Jimmy, it's looking like they're going to move KD and just blow it up. So it's something to watch over the next day and a half, really.
Well, let's talk about that, Chris, because I'm seeing a lot of media online talking about a possible reunion with Golden State and Kevin Durant.
Yeah, I
Now,
could see that.
like, you could?
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, they'd have to give up Kuzminga and Podzinski and probably Draymond for the salaries to work along with picks. I don't think they make it out the West. I think the teams that are at the top of the West are, they're up there for a reason. Like, I think Oklahoma City is going to make it out of the West. They're the deepest team in the league, best team in the league, probably. Um, the Rockets, again, they're a very deep, very good team. Um,
Yeah.
Denver, they still have Jokic and Murray. They're always going to be a threat. And
Yep.
Minnesota
And
obviously
Russell
took a step
Westbrook.
back by trading Cat. Thank you though for that trade. That was a great trade for my Knicks. But um, yeah, I don't know. I don't
Well, here's what I
see
was gonna say.
Kevin
Here's what I was
Durant
gonna
go.
say. Go ahead.
Steph is on the decline. Unfortunately, we hate to say it here in
Yeah.
Legend, but it's not like Steph's not like a top three point guard anymore. So
Mhm.
does adding Kevin Durant minus losing depth, does that make you a finals contender? I don't think so.
Chris, can I be honest with you?
Yeah.
The Warriors remind me of the Jets mid-season about to get Devontae Adams.
I mean, I guess I could
I,
kind of see it,
you know
but
what? I'm not saying like not exactly, but I'm saying in the sense of, oh, okay, we'll just get this other veteran guy and pair him back up with this other veteran guy he used to play with, and everything was gonna be fine again. I mean, I'm
I
not
don't want
saying
to like
that.
minimize it. Kevin Durant is an all-star and one of the best players to ever play this game. Like
Yes, I
he
agree.
could single-handedly he could single-handedly carry a team to the finals,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it hasn't really worked in Phoenix. It didn't really work in Brooklyn. It hasn't worked anywhere other
It'd
than
work in Golden State.
yeah, and that's just like You had prime Steph, Clay, Dre, KD. No one was stopping those teams,
Yeah,
honestly.
that's a good point. Let's talk about one other guy though. Um, Chris. I mean, I'll root for New York too sometimes. Just for the fun of it. Chris is a
We
massive
actually
Knicks fan.
also, I am, but we also did miss one trade. I think we should just talk about
Oh, go.
quickly. Just before we get into some of my Knicks, but De'Aaron Fox
Oh,
went to
right,
San
right. How did I
Antonio.
forget
It's a
about that?
pretty. This is the start of the Spurs becoming one of the next great teams in the NBA. This is the start of players wanting to go to San Antonio to play with Wemby. Um, they got him in a three-team deal with the obviously the Kings, the Spurs, and then the Bulls were involved. The Bulls moved off Zach Levine. He went to San Antonio. Uh, Fox went to no, sorry, I meant to say Sacramento.
Yeah,
Levine went
yeah.
to Sacramento. Fox went to San Antonio, and then there was some picks involved going all over the place. So the Spurs didn't really have to give up any of their young core. They didn't have to give up Castle. They didn't have to give up Vassell. They kept those
Yeah.
guys. It seems like NBA teams, except for the Mavericks, are valuing picks over players right now, which is interesting. Um, and um, they added De'Aaron Fox, and if they can make a little run, maybe to the play-in and get a little bit of experience for Wemby in the playoffs, I think that's going to go well for them next year because it's only a matter of time now before they add that third star to go with them, and then they're a real force in the West because
Yeah.
that team is pretty bad. Like they have some young players, and their Wemby is too good for them to tank. Like that's why they're
Hmm.
in the conversation for a play-in because of how good Wemby is.
Well, I was gonna say about De'Aaron Fox. He came in the league at like 19. I think he's got like 8 years under his belt. He's like 27 years
He's been
old. He's got a.
around. Yeah,
He's been
he's
around,
just
bro, and
finally getting
he's
his
he's.
drop.
That's what I was gonna say. He's 27 only, right? I mean, he's got a lot of playing experience under his belt. So he'll be a great. You could technically call him a veteran, I guess you could say. He'd be a great veteran to help with Wemby, and yet, like Chris just said, he's 27, bro. He's so young still.
They
So
still
like we
have
just
Chris
talked.
Paul there too.
Yeah, Chris Paul's gonna be a great veteran leadership for De'Aaron Fox too. We talk about I just talked about Fox being a veteran too, even though he's only 27. There's gonna be a lot of great years to come for San Antonio. I love Wemby a lot, I really do, because a lot of people were ripping on him when he first got in the league, think he's gonna be a bust, and we had rookie jitters. He's always missing a couple shots in preseason and stuff, but nonetheless, he broke out and he developed well, and the Spurs have a real stud on their hands. Like Chris talked about, Lakers, San Antonio, they're becoming these franchises again that we've seen where players want to go play for these guys now because they got such young potential. Luka, the Lakers now, Wemby and De'Aaron Fox and the Spurs. Players are going to go there because these are the teams that are going to win, especially in the future. These are where players want to go have the rest of their career, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what we're gonna see, especially with Wemby.
Yeah. Um, I want to talk about. Is there anything else you want to talk about, Chris, before I bring it up? Because I'm going to bring it up right
No,
now.
no, yeah, go right into it.
Chris is a massive Knicks fan, but he's also a massive Jalen Brunson fan. Jalen Brunson just had his 18th career 40-point game for the New York Knicks, just making him pass Carmelo Anthony for the most 40-point games in Knicks history. Chris, go ahead. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean the Knicks are on a heater right now. They lost Ananobi to a foot sprain. Hopefully that's not anything too serious, and he's just out for a couple weeks. It looked really bad when it initially happened against the
Yeah,
Lakers on Saturday night. But yeah, I mean the Knicks are on a roll. They just beat the Rockets, the Grizzlies, the Nuggets. They lost to the Lakers, and I believe there was another Western Conference team in there. So they took down pretty much the entire West. Other than Oklahoma City, they've struggled against them this year. But yeah, I mean Jalen Brunson. What can you say about him? Another player that the Mavericks let slip through their fingers because their GM was too cheap to pay him.
that's
So
all I was
thank
gonna
you for
say.
that,
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Dallas, because that's probably the greatest move in Knicks history when you think about the value
Uh,
of they signed him for $110 million, I think, and then extended him on a team friendly deal because he wanted to be in New York and continue to build a winner here. And
yep.
he's just the killer. I mean, he had 40 and 10 last night. He averaged 32 points a game in the playoffs last year. He's everything that the Knicks have needed since. the 1970s when they had Walt Clyde Frazier as their point guard. And the Knicks didn't have a point guard for like 40 years who was this good. They had some, they had some good players like John Starks in the 90s,
Starks.
but every year from like 2000 to like 2022, the Knicks had like a different starting point guard on opening night. It's like it was unbelievable. I remember when they signed him, I mean, they got ripped by the media, like calling it an overpay, and Jalen Brunson is nothing more than a glorified bench player. Even after in those playoffs, I think it was 2021, I think, when Luka was hurt and Brunson was leading the Mavericks and playing really well, and they didn't believe in him. Then he gets to the Knicks,
Yep.
and they still don't believe in him. He makes the All Star game last year. They still don't believe in him. He's starting the All Star game this year. They still don't believe in him. I mean, Jalen Brunson is probably a top three point guard in the NBA. It probably goes Luca, SGA, Brunson, in my opinion.
Wow.
He's one of Brunson is one of 10 players to average more than 10 points and more than 10 assists a night. Him and Jokic are two of those players. So that just
That's
shows you the
insane.
impact that Jalen Brunson has on the Knicks. Um, Captain, New York at its core, I think it really wants to be a basketball city. And when the Knicks are good, the city is buzzing, and
Hmm.
everyone in New York loves Jalen Brunson. So hoping here's to a healthy second half and hopefully a deep playoff run for the Knicks.
Yeah. Well, Chris, I did want to point out one thing you said. You talked about Dallas once having Jalen Brunson and Luka Doncic.
Yeah,
We just talked about,
yeah,
oh, maybe Luka's the problem. Maybe whatever. Who like what is the problem with the Luka thing, right? You lose a guy like Brunson, who Brunson was not really anything with Dallas, right? You go to coach now. I'm looking at coaching and management now for the past however many years it's been. I question that with Dallas. I think that's the problem, honestly. When you lose a guy like Brunson and Doncic, you know, that's where I make my question marks because Brunson obviously shines. Luka did not look like he was 270. We haven't seen what Luka's going to do with the Lakers, obviously, but just knowing what what Luka who Luka is, right, and the kind of player he is, to that makes the question front office and coaching a lot. So that's my take on that. And yeah, like you said, great steal for the Knicks. They found another face of the franchise kind of guy. I'm telling you right now, Brunson will retire a Nick without question.
yeah. He's not
So
going anywhere.
he's not going anywhere anytime soon. Like you said, the cat trade was absolutely incredible. The great addition. Cat also made the I was about to call it the Pro Bowl, the All Star game.
Yeah,
Um,
he's still yeah.
yep. So
Look, I mean, when you
yeah, I
look at
think
how the Knicks have been built, like I remember when we were in high school, when we were getting ready to graduate, the Knicks made the playoffs, and
yep.
it was the year after the bubble, so it was like that weird year where there was no fans, and the Knicks were, Vegas I think set their over under at like 17 wins. They won like 40 something games, made the playoffs. Like it was a crazy year because no one expected anything of them, and that year really kick-started
Flip it around.
this rebuild to where the Knicks are,
Right.
a top two seed in the East. The Knicks were the two seed in the East last year, and I know they went out in the second round, but I think that was obviously due to a plethora of injuries. Ananobi went out in game two. Josh Hart had an abdomen issue. Brunson broke his hand. The list, Mitchell Robinson had his foot yanked down by the dirtiest player in the NBA, Joel
Yep.
Embiid, and fractured his ankle. The list just goes on and on of the injuries they suffered. So by the end of that Pacers series in Game Seven, they were depleted. If they're, if they're fully healthy, I think that they could, make a run to the conference finals. But that's obviously health permitting. So we'll see. But the way that they've built these teams, a lot of
Yeah.
it's weird. I feel like the NFL is the only league for the most part where rookies come in and have an immediate impact. Other leagues, it takes a lot more development, and it's probably because NFL players play more in college compared to like the MLB and the NBA. But this isn't like a drafted and developed team. The Knicks, they've drafted very well, but if you're not in their long term plans, they're trading you, and they're maximizing their return. Did it with RJ Barrett and quickly. That was the first big trade. They
Yep.
um got OG Ananobi, who if you look at their record with OG Ananobi, they're like a 600 basketball team with him. I think they're like 52 and 19 when he plays or something crazy like that. And then they re-signed him after after a good year in the playoff run last year. And then the next day they traded for Mikal Bridges for like 5 first round picks, which was crazy. But like, this Bridges is a really good fit with the Knicks, and he's been really good these last few weeks. Even he had a rough start to the year. And then right before the season started, this is a trade that no one, had any inclinations this was going to happen because OG Anunoby had been rumored in trades for a while. Like everyone in the league wanted to trade for him because he's such a valuable wing defender. And
Yep.
once the Knicks had DiVincenzo, Hart, and Brunson, everyone was talking about getting Mikal Bridges and completing the Nova super team. So that had been going on for a while, and then they make the move for Cat because they lost Hartenstein in free agency and Mitchell Robinson was hurt. So the Knicks were going into the season starting Jericho Sims at the five, which is like you can't do that. And they made the move for Cat, and I think even myself, like I don't know about you, I was a little skeptical because obviously Cat is a really good player, but there's always been some questions about his toughness and
Yeah.
his playoff performances. But the Knicks, Tom Thibodeau had coached him in Minnesota, and I guess the Knicks felt that the Knicks run a system where they maximize talent. Like if you look at the guys they've traded away, like DiVincenzo has kind of been a flop for Minnesota. Julius Randle's been a flop for Minnesota. They must have thought that they could get the most out of Cat, so they make that risky move that some people thought that they gave up too much, but giving away DiVincenzo, and he's starting the All Star game for the Knicks. So I know that was a little bit of a ramble, but it's just
Oh, you're
interesting to
good.
see how they got to where they are.
Yeah, I think the Knicks have solidified themselves as I I don't know if it's bold to say, but a contender for many years. I mean, I think can really do some damage. So we'll see what happens. See what happens. I know that Knicks fans have had it rough for a while, so this is a really nice little push they're putting in for the past couple of years. So um, we'll go into the NFL awards now. I'm just going to list one, and Chris and I will go back and forth a little bit. We'll just keep going down. There's a couple of awards to go through, but we'll save the best for last, obviously. I'm going to start with Offensive Rookie of the Year, Chris. Now, I
Okay.
think you and I both have Jaden Daniels winning.
Yep.
Um, this was the okay as clear as it was. I think any of these guys could have easily won it. If that makes sense, if you understand what I'm saying, like any of these guys are so well deserving of this award. The candidates being Jaden Daniels, Brock Bowers, Malik Neighbors, Bo Nix, and Brian Thomas. Look, I love Brock Bowers. He set the record for like one of the best rookie tight end seasons ever. Malik and Brian Thomas, LSU receivers that were absolute dogs with Jaden Daniels in college, and both got over 1,000 yards receiving and solidified themselves as wide receiver ones on their team. Bo Nix, a guy that went, I believe, ninth or 10th overall in the draft, and people were speculating, is this the right move? He was an older guy, and clearly it worked. He's a 25-year-old quarterback, 26-year-old quarterback. Maybe he's a little older than some other guys, but he cleaned up, the first maybe quarter of the season of his turnovers, and balled out. So this was, I guess you could say a tough one because I really wanted to give it to a lot of these guys, but Jaden Daniels had an absolutely unbelievable season, not just as a rusher, because that's what people saw him as, but as one of the best passers in the league, Chris.
Yeah, I agree with your point that these other candidates had very good years, and maybe in other years they would have been winners, but not this year. Definitely no question Daniels deserves it. I know that playoff doesn't factor into this, but I mean he guided his team to the NFC Championship. He
Yeah.
didn't look like a rookie, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I don't have yeah, I mean I don't have too much more to say. I think he's a clear cut pick. I think we'll see that on Thursday when he gets his award.
Yep.
A quarterback's always going to be, favored in these awards. Like I remember
Yeah.
a couple of years ago when it was Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott, and Zeke probably had the better year, but Dak got the award. That's just kind of how these things go. But yeah, Daniel's absolutely deserving.
Yeah. Um, Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think Chris and I both have Jared Verse. Now, Jared Verse came in to an LA Rams organization that just lost Aaron Donald recently, and they needed, obviously, those are huge. And when I say huge, those are massive shoes to fill. Okay, they needed a guy to disrupt on the defense. And Jared Verse was that guy. He executed really well. Very good run stopper and tackle for loss kind of guy. Had a good amount of sacks as well. I think there wasn't really anybody else that stood out to me. I mean, I think Cooper DeJean was up there. He had a pretty solid season as well. But for first round value, the Rams know how to draft, dude. Good, like fair play to them. Um, so yeah, that's what I got, Jared Verse.
Yeah, I'm with you. Jared Verse, definitely the pick. Like you said, did a really good job. They have drafted incredibly well. I mean, when you look at the defensive line, they're pretty much all homegrown with
Yeah,
Murphy, Fisk, um, Verse, and Kobe Turner. But yeah, focusing on Jared Verse, I don't really think anyone else here had like a D. Roy caliber year. The last couple of years, we've had some really good ones like Sauce Gardner and Will Anderson, who just
yep.
kind of had dominant years. I think this was a little bit of a down year for the defenders, and we kind of knew that with the draft. Like this was a really offensive heavy draft the last
Yeah.
year with all the quarterbacks and the receiver talent. So I think that was kind of to be expected. But yeah, Jared Verse had a really solid year, had a good playoffs. Obviously, it doesn't
Went to the
factor
Pro
in.
Bowl.
Went,
Jared Verse
he
went
did
to the
go to the
Pro.
Pro Bowl. Yeah, so
Yep.
I would agree. I think Verse
I
is definitely the
saw
pick.
I saw a stat. It was Xavier Worthy's fastest run was 21.46 miles per hour this year, just in terms of the whole season. Jared Verse, when they played the Eagles in the playoffs and Barkley went for that touchdown run, he tried to chase him down at the end. Jared Verse ran 21.6 miles per hour on that. As a
Yeah, that's
defensive end,
insane.
that's absurd. That's absolutely
Yeah.
absurd. So yeah, he's gonna be an absolute monster. He grows and develops more and more. So yeah, being in like Chris said, like these guys are all homegrown. You know, you have that connection to Aaron Donald. You know, he's going to be around that facility. That's great mentorship there too. So he'll be a very good game disruptor in the future. Um, I'm going to save some of those other bigger categories for later, like I said, Chris. But I want to talk about Coach of the Year for a second because I think you and I have different ones. But I want to let's hear yours first, and I'll go.
Yeah, so my pick for coach of the year is Kevin O'Connell from the Vikings.
Mm,
Other than, I mean, they had 14 wins, but I think the main point is what he was able to do losing his quarterback right before the season. They were fully prepared to
yeah,
go with JJ McCarthy, and then they get the news that he needs knee surgery, so they turned over to Sam Darnold. And I don't think anyone was expecting this. I mean, I think some people would have been happy if the Vikings played 500 football and like found a way to sneak into the playoffs. I mean, they won 14 games with a journeyman quarterback who
yeah.
hasn't shown that he's been capable of anything like this. So I think that's all on Kevin O'Connell. Credit to him. My pick for the award, mostly just because of the work he did with Sam Darnold.
Yeah. That's a great point. I did originally have it as Kevin O'Connell when I talked to Chris about this when we first made our picks and posted them on social media. But I kind of changed my mind because I looked at Dan Quinn and that Commanders team, how we just talked about Jaden Daniels kind of taking them to uh, the NFC East championship game, and like not NFC East championship, NFC championship game. Yeah, we playoffs don't exactly factor into this, but Commanders went 12-5 this year. Dan Quinn's first season coaching, and the Commanders have not really been anything close to that in the past however many years. I mean, they made the playoffs a couple years with a losing record, a couple years ago with a losing record. Like that's just goes to show like what the Commanders were like for the past couple years. So the fact that Dan Quinn came in, picked his quarterback. I mean, maybe it was a given pick, I guess you could say, because they needed a quarterback badly. They were going to take Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams, but Jaden Daniels was the pick. He picked right, obviously. Um, that defense went into Detroit and slowed him down. And I know that defense struggled a lot this year, but the Commanders stepped it up, dude. And this is coming from a Giants fan. The Commanders, like the Commanders, have solidified themselves as probably the second best team in that division. Um, obviously, Giants are dead last, and the Cowboys are third. But Dan Quinn coming from the Cowboys, and you also saw it too, living proof of what Dan Quinn is. He was a defensive coordinator for the Cowboys before this, and the Cowboys defense struggled this year. So there was definitely a lot of impact with Dan Quinn there. So yeah, he's gonna put a lot of pieces together on that defense to beef it up for sure. So I have Dan Quinn. I mean, I think that Sean Payton did a great job as well. He was another candidate I liked a lot. Kevin O'Connell, obviously. And then the other guys were, I believe, Dan Campbell and Andy Reid. So those are just givens, obviously. I mean, they've always had consistent years for the past couple of years. So you can't really give it to those guys. But yeah, like Chris said, coming over adversity was huge for me. And I think that Dan Quinn just got over a bigger hump compared to Kevin O'Connell. But It'll be a close one. I think Kevin O'Connell's favored, but honestly, I could have given it to Sean Payton, Dan Quinn, or Kevin O'Connell, but I prefer Dan Quinn in the situation purely for the kind of roster he had and how far he went, they won 12 games, so that's huge to me. Um, there's an assistant coach of the year award, Chris. If you want to talk about that, or do you want to go right to the other ones?
We could spend like a minute just
All
each
right, go
picking
for it.
our Yeah, I'm gonna be biased. I'll just say Aaron Glenn, obviously because he was Jets head coach. But I actually do think, given how many Detroit Lions were on injured reserve on the defensive side of the football, that he is a very deserving candidate because in a must-win game in Week 17 with like over half their defense out, they shut down Sam Darnold and one of the best offenses in the league. And I know they had that hiccup in the playoffs, but throughout the whole regular season, they lost Hutchinson really early. Felt like every week they were losing players. Anzalone broke his arm.
Yep.
A bunch of their defensive linemen were out. They were down a ton of corners. Every week they were losing someone, and they didn't skip a beat. I think he did a really good job coaching that defense with what he had and keeping them as a top 10 unit throughout the year.
Yeah, I agree with that. However, I'm taking his former division rival in Brian Flores. This is where I go to the Vikings for a coaching award. I think Brian Flores made that defense made the Vikings win 14 games, quite frankly, in my opinion. I think the Vikings defense is what kept them in a lot of games. I understand Sam Darnold did ball out this year for majority of the season, but the Vikings had a lot of sacks, a lot of takeaways, right? That's huge. And I'm not saying that they don't have like great players, but there weren't a lot of guys when I looked at the Vikings roster that could be like, oh, I know that guy. This guy stands out to me. This guy stands out to me. These guys were just coached well, in my opinion, by Brian Flores. And we talked about Flores a little bit, like about for head coaching candidates, all that stuff. But Flores has come from, a little bit of a, I guess you'd call a hole when he was the Dolphins head coach and stuff like that. So he's looking for redemption. And he made the Vikings defense, quite frankly, a top 3 defense in the league this past year. Definitely competing with Philly and Denver for one of the best defenses in the league. I just thought they were terrifying. And, obviously my Giants are not any good, but they came in to MetLife Stadium the first week of the year, and I saw what they did. And yeah, part of me was like, yeah, the Giants are just bad, but this defense was like murder. That's what I saw, bro. It was annihilation. So, it wasn't like any mercy shown. So that's why I'm taking the Brian Flores for this award. Um, so yeah, Chris and I are going to debate a little bit on these last 3 because these are some of the bigger awards for sure. But the first one that we both had on the same page was Defensive Player of the Year. Chris, if you want to start with that.
We both had Pat Surtain. I think this is an
Yeah.
award that typically goes to edge rushers. You see it,
Yeah.
Miles Garrett, TJ Watt, Michael Parsons. There's such a value on rushing the passer and affecting the passer. But, this year was a little bit of a down year. Micah was out. TJ was out a little bit. So we have some new candidates on here. Shout out Zach Bond, who was signed as like a special teamer, went first team All Pro as a starting linebacker, and is
Insane.
sauce for DPOY. But yeah, my pick is Pat Surtain. He had a lockdown year. Corner hasn't won it in a little bit. Pat Surtain, arguably the best corner in football. I know he's up there with, I think most people would agree that he is, but the top corners in the game, him, Stingley, Sauce, Darius Slay, guys like that. But yeah, I mean, he had a lockdown year. He just keeps getting better, even after a large contract extension. Probably had his best year. So I'll go with Pat Sertan.
Yep. Pat Surtain as well. I mean, Trey Hendrickson had, I believe, like 19 sacks or something like that, which was huge. But, you talk about the value of what a player is to a team as well when it comes to these kinds of awards. The Bengals defense, we talked about it a lot, Chris. I mean, as much as Hendrickson did, the Bengals defense did nothing else, dude. I mean, they
They were
were
bad.
empty, right? I mean, Denver was able. Pat Surtain made a lot of made the
Made
defense a
life
lot more
difficult for
comfortable.
a lot of
Right,
teams.
made it more difficult for other teams and more comfortable for his own defense because these guys are like, okay, wide receiver 1 is out of the game now. They don't have to. Nobody else has to think about him because Pat Surtain's on him. Okay, that's a big factor in a game when you can lock up a wide receiver 1 like that, and he did it to a lot of big time names this year. So when you have a guy like Pat Surtain that could just say, hey, their number 1 weapon is already out of the game. You guys go do your thing. That's what makes him so valuable. And that's why I'm picking him. And that's why I believe why you're picking him too, Chris, is he was just able to basically delete wide receiver one on any team that he went against, or whatever number one target, whatever it is, because he's gone against some tight ends as well. But yeah, Pat Surtain will definitely win it. It'll be nice to see a little shakeup too from the defensive end, like you talked about, Chris, because TJ Watt's on there. He was a little banged up this year. He didn't have exactly the best season. But I'm not going to give it to as much as a game disruptor as he is. I can't give it to him purely for the fact of the kind of season he had. He didn't have a typical TJ Watt season. So I'm giving it to Pat Surtain for sure, but very deserving award for him. The other thing too, Chris, real quick, is they don't throw the ball to him as much. Why would they? We talked about that with Sauce Gardner too, like in college. I remember talking when he was first coming out, like everyone's like, oh, Sauce isn't a good corner. He played at Cincinnati. But I'm like, if you're not getting the ball thrown to you, that means you're a threat, dude. Like that's as simple as it gets. I mean, so yeah, that's why I think Pat Surtain deserved it well. All right. Offensive Player of the Year and MVP are the two ones that Chris and I definitely do not agree on at all. Chris, you go first. We're going to talk about Offensive Player of the Year.
Yes, I mean this will pain you, but to me it's pretty
I
clear.
know.
Saquon from the year that he's had, 2,000 yards, whole bunch of touchdowns. Arguably carried the Eagles to the Super Bowl. Again, the playoffs don't count, but Eagles had a little bit of a down year last year. They signed Saquon, and boom, they're back to being the best team in the NFC. So it's a nice story for Saquon. 'Cause I know he had a tough couple years for the Giants. Injuries, poor management,
Yep.
poor offensive line play. All those factored into his decision to leave, and he'd been getting a lot of heat, for leaving. And he even said it yesterday. Like I think he's tired of hearing, I'm not
Yeah.
associating you with the fans, but from the Giants fans, just like going at him or that. Like it's over, man. Like he left you. Like it is what it is. The team didn't
Yeah.
do anything to support him, and he had the year that we all knew. There's a reason why he went second overall. Like you can argue that it was really too high for a running back, but for seasons like this, that everyone knew he was capable of. So
Listen, man.
I think he'll be awarded for it.
Listen, we did him dirty. That's as simple as it gets. I've said it countless times on this podcast. We did not handle him properly. He deserved a contract. As plain as simple as it gets. I don't care what you say about Saquon left us. Saquon did us dirty. We did him dirty. We didn't do what I'm gonna say we as the fans. I'm saying maybe the fans too, because the fact that we're disrespecting him right now. Yes, he's in an Eagles jersey. It sucks. It's terrible. It is the worst feeling I've ever had since being like a fan of this team. I honestly am being serious when I say that. It is terrible. The fact that he's having so much success, I'm so happy for him too. Of course, it has to be in a Philly jersey. It stinks, right? But the season he had was unbelievable, and you got to give him the respect for leaving and becoming the guy that we always wanted him to be. With that being said, we had a guy a couple years ago by the name of Cooper Kupp win the Triple Crown, meaning he got most receptions, most receiving yards, and most receiving touchdowns in a season. Who did that this year? Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase is my pick for the Offensive Player of the Year. That sounds biased because I just talked about Barkley, whatever. I don't care. The reason why Barkley had such a phenomenal season was also because of the phenomenal offensive line he had. Now, I'm not discrediting Barkley in any way possible. We've seen such little times where there's 2,000 yards rushers. I get that. But we've seen such fewer times for a Triple Crown winner. Okay? And the fact that you rewarded Cooper Kupp with the Offensive Player of the Year, when in my opinion, he actually should have been MVP that year, which was kind of bold, I get, but he was the offensive star there. You got to give it to Ja'Marr Chase in this case. The dude was always open everywhere he went. And yeah, I get it. Barkley took advantage of every hole opening, whatever you want to say. But the fact that the point that Joe Shane made, I'm kind of just trying to use this in my argument, Chris. If you want to debate me, I feel free, please. Joe Shane made the argument of the value of the offensive line. Did he prove that? No. Who proved that to me? Barkley proved that to me because he went to the place with the best offensive line and played behind the Eagles. And then he went for 2,000 yards. Do I think Barkley does that on a lot of other teams? Absolutely not. I think he might only do it on the Ravens and the Eagles, probably at most. Um, so yeah, I'm taking Jamar Chase for the pure fact of how open he gets all the time. Every ball is his. And I quite frankly believe he's the best receiver in the league this year. That's my take.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't think you could go wrong with either pick. I just think in such a pass heavy league, I think it's more impressive that Saquon ran for 2,000 because there's a reason why the Bengals were throwing that much, and it's because they were always losing and they were down at every game because their defense
Good
was
point.
terrible. That's not like a knock on Jamar Chase or a knock on your argument. I just think that that's circumstantial, and I value 2,000 yards as a rusher. I think more than I value the receiver triple crown. I know it's rarer, but in a league that's so set on passing the football, I think it's harder to rush for 2,000 yards. That's just
Yeah.
my opinion on it.
I
I
mean,
don't think you could
yeah.
go wrong. Like I think either is a very good choice.
Like I even think Joe Burrow could win it too, Chris, and it's definitely because he's not an MVP talker anymore, in my opinion, for the pure fact of how bad the Bengals were this year. But the dude had one of the best seasons I've ever seen out of a quarterback to not make the playoffs. And yeah, like you said, he
Yeah.
did throw it. He threw it a ton, which is fair. But like he was still effective while passing. That's the thing. And yeah, like you said, it is pass heavy, and I agree with that. The other thing is Barkley ran it 350 times, so he got a
Yeah,
lot of
no,
touches. He got
it's
a
a
lot of
lot of
touches on the
yards.
ball.
Yep.
Right, but you're
Yep.
right. You're right in the sense of it is a pass heavy league though. But and the Eagles were able to become an effective, dangerous offensive team on a run first team, which is a great point by you. It is so impressive, and I think I give a lot of credit to Barkley, but I got to give more credit to the offensive line, like we talked about, Chris. Bringing in a guy like I know we talked about him a lot, and how much you despise him too, which is Mekhi Becton, and Cam Jurgens, coming in and becoming, I guess not Pro Bowler, but Pro Bowler caliber, I guess you could say, offensive lineman or good quality offensive lineman play at the minimum. I mean, you lose Jason Kelsey to get this new guy at center, and he's actually killing it. And you bring Kai Becton and move him from tackle to guard, and he's great at his pulling and all that stuff too. So that's where I'm going to give the credit to. And yeah, you could definitely give the award to Barkley and then credit the offensive line as well. That's what Barkley would do 100%. I could see him getting that award and saying this is for the offensive lineman. Because he is a very humble player and stuff like that. So that's my take on it, though, Chris. I think Jamar was just an absolute dog this year, and him and Joe Burrow were the only reason why Bengals were ever alive this entire season.
Yeah, it's a total toss up. I think it could go either way. I don't think anyone would have a problem if one of those two won. So, but yeah, last but not least, wrapping up the episode with the most important award that I don't think you and I will ever agree on, even when it's
Nope.
settled. MVP. So I think it's pretty clear that it's a two-man race between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. I'll take it first, and then I'll let you air out your thoughts. I
Go
have
for it.
Lamar. He's gonna win his third MVP. I think I know that the argument against him is that how many Pro Bowlers he has on his team. But look, if you're gonna give it to Lamar last year and he had a way better year this year than last year, like I don't understand the logic of not giving it to him this year when he had more passing touchdowns, more passing yards, I believe a higher completion percentage than Josh Allen. I know the rushing factors in because Josh Allen had a lot of rushing touchdowns, but most of Lamar's stats are better, and this isn't a most valuable. It's not most valuable player anymore. This is really like the best quarterback award because it's not who offers the
Mhm.
most value to their team. It's which quarterback had the best year. And if you're looking at the stats and you knock them down one by one, I give it to Lamar. I understand the argument of Allen being more valuable because of the supporting cast around him not being on the same level as Baltimore, but that's not the criteria for the award right now. It's been trending as a quarterback award, which quarterback had the best season. So, based on that logic and Lamar having better stats in most categories, the passing categories specifically, which are valued more, I think, by the writers, and factoring in that he did win AP first, or he was named AP first team by the same
Yep.
writers who are going to name the MVP. I don't really see him not winning the MVP. But I would love
Chris,
to hear your argument for Josh Allen. So
well, Chris, here's the thing: is I completely agree with you.
yeah,
I know Lamar's going to win it, but he
yeah,
shouldn't, in my opinion. That's what I think. Okay, that's my reasoning. Like Chris just mentioned, he took the words right out of my mouth for my entire argument. Baltimore has such a complete roster compared to Buffalo. Okay, let's get that thing straight. Playmakers on defense, playmakers on offense, great. Josh Allen, okay, he's got James Cook, very versatile, very dynamic, great running back, who's on the rise. Okay, let's name a Pro Bowler other than Josh Allen. There you go. That's the list. You got nobody. Josh Allen had nobody, and he does it every year now. Obviously he had Diggs in the past, but I think the whole drama with Diggs too was, he forced Josh to throw the ball to him and stuff like that. This was, in my opinion, I know he didn't have like 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns passing or whatever. He had 6 interceptions only, Chris. Only 6. I know Lamar had less too, but in terms of a Josh Allen caliber season, this was, in my opinion, Josh's best season yet. And I just think that his decision making improved so much. And without him, the Bills would probably be one of the worst teams in the league. Not like out of the playoffs or just making the playoffs barely. They would, without question, be one of the worst teams in the league. Now, what do I see for Baltimore? Let's say I'm just making hypotheticals, obviously. You take away Lamar. Does Derrick Henry even go there? Maybe not. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe Lamar's probably the reason why Derrick Henry comes to Baltimore. But let's say you just take Lamar out of that team. You still have Derrick Henry and a solid Ravens defense, excuse me. And yeah, and a solid Ravens offense, I guess you could say. The RPO is what was so deadly for Baltimore. But the RPO was so deadly for Baltimore because of Derrick Henry, not just because of Lamar. Lamar was able to take advantage of that, fair play to him. Here's what I hate the most, though, Chris, is what we talked about a couple times already, is the factor of the playoffs not being a factor in these awards. I think they should be. Just because it's a whole year thing. The playoffs are where it matters most. It's where the best perform. I guess you can't, for the pure fact of not
can't
every team
really,
makes
yeah,
it, because
yeah,
every team makes
exactly.
it, which stinks. Because Josh just balled out, in my opinion, in these playoffs. I don't know. I think that if I have this argument with a lot of people, like if you take two MVP like if you take Barkley and Josh Allen and you put them against each other for MVP, take my hypothetical is take them both off the team and see what do you think the team would do. Now, do the Eagles? I don't even think the Eagles are as good. I mean, I think you would agree with that, Chris. I think that's why it stinks because I think Barkley could have easily won MVP this year, and I did have him
Yeah,
for the first half of the year being my MVP candidate. It just stinks because you said, Chris, it's a very heavy quarterback league, like very valuable quarterback league. It stinks because there's a lot of talent like Jamar Chase or like when Cooper Kupp got Triple Crown or Christian McCaffrey or Barkley, these kinds of incredible years these guys are having, and they don't get any recognition for it besides offensive player of the year, which is great. But think about that Rams run, it's Cooper Kupp. Think about the Eagles run, it's Saquon Barkley. If you think about the Bills run for this year, although Lamar's stats are better, the value of Josh Allen to the Bills is so much greater than Lamar to the Ravens. And I know that's bold because Lamar is so valuable. I get that. He's a 2-time MVP winner. He will win his third this year. But without Josh, the Bills are nothing. That's my only argument for this, Chris.
yeah. I mean, you weigh more the value, like the physical value, which is what the award should be, but that's just
Right.
not what it is. Also, my last take before we wrap up, I think if the Eagles let Saquon get the rushing record and didn't
He's MVP.
push like 10 of his touchdowns, he's easily MVP.
He would have broken LaDainian Tomlinson's record for like total touchdowns in a year.
And he
I
would
think
have
he
had the
fell
best
at the
year.
one. Chris, didn't he like fall at the 1 yard line like 9 times or something like that?
I mean, Jalen Hurts had like 14 rushing touchdowns,
Yeah,
so
that's absurd. And we
yeah,
know for a fact that 10 of those were tush push. So
most likely, yeah.
like Barkley could have easily had 30 touchdowns and probably would have had the best season of a running back ever. But those are Chris and I's takes on NFL awards. You could see we got into a little bit of NBA trade talks and NBA news. I think Chris and I will get a little bit more involved in that after the Super Bowl, which would be great. Gives us some more sports to talk about. Chris, you got anything else to add before we end it?
No, sir. We'll be back on Friday. Super Bowl preview.
Heck
We'll have a
yeah.
nice hour-long discussion about every aspect of the Super Bowl. So tune
Oh,
in for that one.
I'm so ready for that. That's gonna be. We got a lot to talk about for this game. It's gonna be very interesting.
Yeah, it might be our best one yet. So
I
make sure to
agree.
tune in.
Heck yeah. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. Hope everybody has a great week and see you Friday.